Emma Walsh stood motionless on the courthouse steps, rain pelting her shoulders as she clutched a manila folder of bankruptcy papers. Water streamed down her face, mingling with tears she refused to acknowledge. Beside her, Lily's small hand tightened in hers, the 9-year-old's other arm wrapped around their German shepherd's neck. Scout pressed close, the dog's warmth the only comfort in the November chill that had nothing to do with weather. The finality of it all settled like a stone in Emma's chest. 36 years of life, 15 years in a career she'd once loved, all reduced to this moment. Broke, jobless, and 3 days from eviction. The Chicago skyline loomed behind her, a silhouette of steel and glass that had once represented possibility. Now it felt like a wall separating her from the life she'd built, or thought she'd built, before everything collapsed. Lily's voice cut through the sound of rain on concrete. "Where will we sleep tonight, Mom?" The question landed with the weight of every failure Emma had tried to shield her daughter from. 3 weeks ago, she'd been senior project manager at Meridian Design Group, overseeing a portfolio of luxury developments. 3 weeks ago, before she'd refused to falsify safety reports on the Lakeside Heights project. 3 weeks ago, before she'd been escorted from the building by security, her reputation shredded by whispers of difficult and unstable. Emma's fingers trembled as she stuffed the papers into her messenger bag, the same leather satchel that had once carried ambitious architectural designs to boardroom presentations. Now it held only essentials: a change of clothes, her laptop, the final eviction notice from their Lincoln Park apartment, and Lily's school photo from last spring when everything had still been normal. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. Another creditor, likely. She'd stopped answering days ago, letting them chase the ghost of who she used to be. But the vibration persisted, insistent. Scout's ears perked up, the dog's attention fixed on Emma's coat pocket as if the phone itself posed a threat. Emma pulled it out, finger hovering over the decline button. Unknown number. Not a creditor then, probably spam. She almost rejected it before a flicker of hope. Maybe a response to one of the dozens of job applications she'd sent out made her answer. The voice that emerged carried the weight of years, gravelly but formal. "Ms. Walsh? This is Henry Barrett. I'm the executor of your father's estate." Emma almost laughed at the absurdity. Robert Walsh, no, David Walsh, she corrected herself mentally, had been dead for 2 years, leaving behind nothing but a modest pension that barely covered his funeral expenses. Or so she'd thought. The elderly attorney's words cut through her cynicism with surgical precision. "Your father left you property in Ridge Valley, Appalachia. His final wishes require your signature on certain paperwork. The address I have is, well, it's not exactly an address, more a set of coordinates deep in the mountain foothills." A hollow feeling spread through Emma's chest. Her father, the man who'd spent his life working on railroads, who'd taught her to read blueprints before storybooks, who'd become increasingly distant as she grew into adulthood, had left her something after all. Not that it mattered now, not when she was drowning. "What's the address?" Lily tugged at her sleeve, eyes wide with the kind of hope only children could muster in desperate situations. "Is it Grandpa? Did Grandpa leave us something? Like a treasure?" The innocence in her daughter's voice made Emma's throat tighten. Barrett provided coordinates instead of a street number, a location so remote it existed outside conventional mapping. The kind of place where cell towers didn't reach and GPS gave up. Emma's architectural training immediately flagged the impracticality. No utilities, no road access, no infrastructure. Another burden to bear when she could barely stand under the weight she already carried. But when she explained her current situation, the bankruptcy, the eviction, the complete absence of options, Barrett paused. Then his voice softened with unexpected gentleness. "The property is remote but inhabitable. If you need a place to stay while sorting your affairs, it might serve. I'll wire the small balance remaining in your father's account. Should be enough for bus tickets and basic supplies." Out of options and with eviction looming in 72 hours, Emma made a decision that felt like surrender. She'd go to Ridge Valley, sign whatever papers needed signing, assess whatever property existed, and use any proceeds to rebuild. A detour, not a destination. Temporary shelter until she figured out what came next. The balance from her father's account arrived in her bank app within the hour. $242. After bus tickets for her, Lily, and Scout's travel fee, she'd have just under $200 to her name. Everything she owned in the world reduced to a number that wouldn't cover a single night in the city that had once welcomed her ambitions. The next morning, she stood at the Greyhound station watching her entire life consolidate into one suitcase and a backpack. Lily clutched her small rolling bag decorated with unicorn stickers, a remnant from happier times. Scout sat between them, the dog's brown eyes tracking every person who passed with protective vigilance the animal had developed over the past 3 weeks of instability. The journey would take them through 4 states, ending at a station 30 miles from Ridge Valley where Barrett had arranged for the local mail carrier to provide the rest of the transportation. As the bus pulled away from Chicago, Emma forced herself not to look back. The city that had once been her canvas had become her prison. Perhaps distance would provide perspective. Perhaps in the quiet of the mountains, she'd find clarity about what came next. Hours bled into one another as the landscape transformed from urban sprawl to rolling countryside. Lily dozed against her shoulder while Scout occupied the seat beside them, the driver having mercifully overlooked regulations about service animals when he'd seen the exhaustion in Emma's eyes. Her thoughts churned relentlessly, replaying the moment everything had unraveled. The project manager's voice, smooth as oil. "Just sign off on the report, Walsh. The concrete mixture is close enough to spec. We're on deadline." Her refusal. The thinly veiled threat. The realization that this wasn't the first time corners had been cut, just the first time she'd been asked to put her name on it. The choice between her integrity and her career. She'd chosen integrity and lost everything. Lily stirred, small fingers reaching for the envelope Emma had tucked into her coat pocket. Barrett had given it to her at their brief meeting, yellowed with age, addressed to her in her father's precise engineer's handwriting. Emma had been avoiding it, afraid of what posthumous disappointment it might contain. But now, with nothing else to occupy her mind and Lily's curious eyes watching, she opened it. The paper inside crackled with age, her father's words marching across the page in the methodical style she remembered from childhood homework help. "My dear Emma and Lily." Emma's breath caught. He'd known about Lily. Known about his granddaughter despite never meeting her, never reaching out during the pregnancy or the early years of Lily's life when Emma had been drowning in new motherhood and career ambitions. The acknowledgement felt like a knife and a bomb simultaneously. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and you found your way to Ridge Valley. I've never been good with words or timing, a failing that cost me my marriage, and, I fear, my relationship with you. But I've always tried to prepare, to build foundations strong enough to withstand whatever comes. What I leave you isn't much by city standards, but it's something abandoned but never broken. The true inheritance waits on the old Highland line, where time stopped but possibility didn't, more valuable than money, worth 1,000,000 lives saved." Emma's hands trembled as she continued reading. The letter spoke of understanding better than anyone else could, of something that, like her, had been abandoned but retained its worth. Her father's final sentence hit like a physical blow. "The truth stays buried until someone brave enough brings it into light. Your mother never understood why I kept going back there. Perhaps you will. With love, Dad." Folded inside the letter was a hand-drawn map marked with trails and landmarks that meant nothing to Emma, coordinates that matched what Barrett had provided, and symbols she didn't recognize. Animal shapes, a bear, an owl, a fox, a deer. Each one positioned at different points on the crude drawing. Lily leaned closer, her small finger tracing the animals. "Mom, Grandpa drew animals, like the postcards." Emma froze. "What postcards?" Her daughter's face lit up with the kind of excitement children showed when revealing a secret they'd kept carefully hidden. "Grandpa sent me postcards. Lots of them. They had animals and riddles on the back. I kept them all in my school folder." The revelation hit Emma with unexpected force. Her father, the man who'd seemed to forget she existed after her mother's death, had been maintaining a relationship with his granddaughter. Not just maintaining, building, teaching, preparing. While Emma had assumed he'd cut himself off from family entirely, he'd been reaching out to Lily in ways Emma had never known. "Why didn't you tell me?" Lily's face fell, recognizing the hurt in her mother's voice, even if she didn't fully understand it. "They came to school. The secretary gave them to me at lunch. I thought you knew. They were addressed to me, not you, so I kept them in my special folder. Emma pulled her daughter close, breathing through the complicated tangle of betrayal and wonder. Her father had found a way to connect with Lily that circumvented Emma's hurt and anger. Part of her resented the secrecy. Part of her marveled at the man's determination to maintain family ties, despite the distance Emma had imposed after her mother's death. Also folded in the letter was a newspaper clipping, edges crumbling at her touch. Highland Railway decommissioned after 52 years of service. The headline dated July 1975, barely mentioning an incident that had led to closure but providing no details. 2 lives lost, investigation pending, operations suspended indefinitely. Scout suddenly lifted her head from where she'd been resting, ears pricked forward, a soft whine escaping her throat. The dog stared at the newspaper clipping as if it held some scent or memory Emma couldn't perceive. When Emma held the paper closer, Scout's whine intensified, the animal's body going rigid with tension. "It's okay, girl. Just an old newspaper." But the dog's reaction planted a seed of unease in Emma's mind. Scout had been her father's dog originally, or so Emma had always believed. When David had died, the 3-year-old German Shepherd had simply appeared at Emma's apartment with a note from a neighbor saying David had left instructions for the one to go to his daughter if anything happened to him. Emma had assumed it was her father's final, awkward attempt at connection. Now she wondered what else the dog knew that she didn't. The bus driver's voice jarred her from her thoughts. Ridge Valley, final stop. The station turned out to be little more than a weathered bench beside a general store. As the bus pulled away, Emma stood alone on the roadside with Lily and Scout, the enormity of her decision suddenly clear. The air felt different here, cleaner, heavier with moisture, carrying scents of pine and earth that Chicago's filtered atmosphere had long since scrubbed away. Silence expanded around them, broken only by birdsong and the distant sound of rushing water. No mail carrier waited to take them the final 30 miles. No phone service allowed her to call Barrett. The store was closed, a handwritten sign indicating it wouldn't open until tomorrow. Emma checked her watch, 4:37 p.m. Daylight would last a few more hours. According to the map, Ridge Valley lay northeast following a state highway that wound through the mountains. Lily looked up at her, exhaustion evident in every line of her small body. "Are we sleeping here tonight?" Emma adjusted her backpack and gripped her suitcase. Pride won out over practicality. She'd come this far. She wouldn't spend her first night sleeping on a bench like some vagrant. Not in front of her daughter, not when she was supposed to be the adult who had everything under control even though that facade had shattered weeks ago. "We're going to walk. It's not too far." Scout trotted ahead as if she knew the route, periodically looking back to ensure they followed. The road climbed steadily, each curve revealing vistas more breathtaking than the last. Despite her circumstances, Emma couldn't help admiring the engineering of the highway, the way it hugged the mountain's contours, the precise calculation of each grade and banking. Her father would have appreciated this road. The thought came unbidden, accompanied by a pang of something between grief and resentment. An hour passed, then another. No cars came. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the pavement. Emma's arms ached from carrying the suitcase, and Lily had long since given up pulling her own bag, allowing Emma to manage both while the child trudged beside her. Scout ranged ahead, always within sight but clearly impatient with the human's slow pace. As dusk approached, Scout suddenly stopped dead in the road. The dog's ears swiveled forward, her entire body going still with predatory focus. Then she bolted, leaving the pavement and disappearing into the forest to their right down a barely visible trail. Lily's scream cut through the mountain air. "Scout, come back!" Before Emma could stop her, her daughter was running after the dog, small legs pumping as she crashed into the underbrush. Emma dropped the suitcase and sprinted after them, terror flooding her system. The forest swallowed Lily within seconds, pine branches whipping Emma's face as she fought through vegetation that seemed determined to hold her back. "Lily, stop running! Wait for me!" Her daughter's voice drifted back, already distant. "Scout knows where she's going, Mom. Follow us!" Emma had no choice. She plunged deeper into the forest, following the sounds of Lily's passage and Scout's occasional bark. The trail, if it could be called that, wound between ancient trees and moss-covered boulders. Rational thought screamed for her to turn back, find the highway, wait for morning. But maternal instinct overrode logic. Her daughter was somewhere ahead, chasing a dog that had inexplicably abandoned training to pursue some invisible goal. The forest grew denser, the light dimmer. Just as Emma began to question whether she'd lost them entirely, she emerged into a small clearing and stopped short. For her lay a set of railroad tracks nearly hidden beneath years of vegetation, running perpendicular to her path and disappearing into the forest in both directions. The rails, though rusted, remained solid beneath their camouflage of leaves and moss. Lily stood on the tracks, Scout beside her, both waiting as if this had been their destination all along. "Mom, look! Secret train tracks! Where do they go?" Emma knelt, brushing away leaves to reveal steel that had once carried weight and purpose. These tracks appeared on no modern map. Yet here they were, the Highland Line from the newspaper clipping. The railway that had closed 50 years ago, abandoned to nature's slow reclamation. Scout barked once, sharp and commanding, then trotted east along the tracks. Lily started to follow, and Emma caught her daughter's shoulder. "We don't know where these go. We need to turn back, find the highway." But as she spoke, she recognized the futility. They'd been walking for nearly 3 hours. Darkness would fall within 30 minutes. Retracing their path through dense forest in the dark would be more dangerous than following maintained railroad tracks, even if those tracks led nowhere certain. Scout barked again, insistent. The dog sat 20 yards ahead, tail wagging, looking back with an expression Emma could only describe as purposeful, as if the animal knew exactly where she was leading them and couldn't understand why the humans were being so slow. "Okay, girl, we trust you." They followed the tracks eastward, pushing through undergrowth that hadn't seen human passage in decades. The terrain grew steeper, the tracks curving around the mountain's shoulder. Lily began to lag, exhaustion finally catching up with her 9-year-old endurance. Emma hoisted her daughter onto her back, grateful she'd left the suitcase behind, marked for later retrieval, if there was a later, if this wasn't the final bad decision in a string of catastrophes. The sun had nearly set when they rounded a final bend, and Emma froze. Ahead, the tracks passed through a stone tunnel, its entrance partially collapsed but still passable. Beyond it, barely visible in the fading light, sat 3 weathered train cars. Their once blue paint had faded to a ghostly gray, metal sides streaked with rust and moisture damage. Vines crawled up their exteriors, and small saplings grew between the rails. But they remained largely intact, a time capsule from an era when trains carried more than freight. Scout trotted to the nearest car, a passenger coach with tall windows, many cracked or broken. The dog scratched at the door, then sat, her trained sit-and-wait behavior that Emma had never taught her. The animal looked back at them expectantly, tail thumping against the gravel ballast. Lily slid off Emma's back, exhaustion forgotten in the face of discovery. "Mom, it's like a castle, a train castle. Can we live here? Is this what Grandpa left us?" Emma approached slowly, her architect's eye cataloging details even as wonder competed with dismay. The lead car was a passenger coach, its vintage design placing it somewhere in the early to mid-20th century. Behind it sat what appeared to be a dining or observation car, its curved panoramic windows reflecting the last golden rays of sunset. The final car, a freight carrier, looked more utilitarian but also more intact, its reinforced construction having weathered decades better than its companions. On the freight car's bottom step, a small bouquet of fresh wildflowers lay carefully arranged. Someone had been here recently. Someone still cared for these abandoned relics. Emma tested the passenger car's door handle. It turned with a protesting screech that echoed through the mountain stillness. The door finally gave way, hinges shrieking like tortured metal. The smell hit her immediately, musty, damp, with undertones of old leather and something metallic. She hesitated at the threshold, suddenly aware that she was trespassing, though on whose property remained unclear. Inside, rows of seats faced forward like silent witnesses to decades of abandonment. Dust motes danced in the beams of dying light that penetrated dirty windows. The floor beneath creaked but held as Emma ventured forward, testing each step before committing her weight. Her architectural training cataloged issues automatically: water damage to the ceiling, rotting sections of flooring, compromised window seals. Probable mold behind wall panels, all fixable with time and resources, neither of which she possessed. Lily pushed past her, scowled at the child's heels, both exploring with the fearlessness of youth and canine confidence. Mom, there's beds. Well, seats, but we can sleep on them. And look, the windows show the whole valley. Emma moved to join her daughter at the observation end of the car. Through grimy glass, the view took her breath away. The train sat on a level plateau overlooking miles of forested valley, mountains rising in layers of blue-gray until they merged with gathering clouds. As darkness fell, stars began appearing with a brilliance Emma hadn't seen since childhood, camping trips before light pollution became the norm. A sound outside made her pulse spike. Footsteps on gravel, approaching slowly. Emma moved to place herself between the door and Lily, one hand finding her daughter's shoulder. Scout's ears pricked forward, but the dog's tail wagged, showing none of the tension that usually preceded a threat. An elderly woman stood in the doorway, wrapped in a woolen shawl despite the summer evening's warmth. Gray hair pulled back in a neat bun framed a face mapped with wrinkles, eyes sharp and assessing beneath weathered lids. She carried a basket of apples, incongruously domestic in this wild setting. You must be Emma, and this must be Lily. The woman's voice held the distinctive cadence of Appalachia, vowels stretched and consonants softened. She spoke Emma's name like she'd been expecting her, like their arrival wasn't a surprise, but rather a long-anticipated certainty. Emma's hand tightened on Lily's shoulder. How do you know our names? Who are you? The woman's smile revealed a lifetime of stories etched into every line. I'm Dorothy Hayes. I've looked after these cars for decades. Your father spoke of you often during his visits, showed me pictures of Lily from her Facebook. Every few months he'd come up here, work on the cars, and talk about his girls. Said someday you'd come when you needed them most. The revelation hit Emma like cold water. Her father had been coming here regularly, maintaining a relationship with this place, with this woman, while Emma had assumed he'd cut himself off from the world after her mother died. He'd been preparing something, preserving something, all while she'd been convinced he'd forgotten she existed. Lily stepped forward, her natural friendliness overcoming the wariness Emma had tried to instill. You knew my grandpa? What was he like? He sent me postcards with riddles, but I never got to meet him. Dorothy's expression softened as she looked at the child. He was a complicated man, carried heavy burdens, but he loved you more than anything, talked about you constantly. Your riddles were his way of teaching you to think like an engineer, to solve problems others might miss. She turned her attention back to Emma, pulling something from her basket, a small music box, its wooden surface worn smooth by handling. He left this for Lily, said to give it to her when you arrived. Also said you'd need these. From her other pocket, Dorothy produced an old iron key and what looked like a deed document. Emma took them cautiously, suspicious of generosity that came too easily, too conveniently. I don't understand. If my father owned these cars, why would you have the deed? Dorothy settled onto one of the old seats, the wood creaking under her slight weight but holding firm. Your father bought these cars in 1982 for $1 from a bankruptcy trustee, but he never registered the deed proper. Kept it quiet, paid me to hold the paperwork, maintain things. Said someday his daughter would need a place to start over, and he didn't want anyone knowing it existed until that day came. She held out the deed, her weathered hand steady. Technically, the deed's in my name. Highland Railway went bankrupt in '75, cars abandoned. I bought them officially in '82. Your father paid me that dollar, and we had an understanding. Now I'm offering you the same deal he got. $1 for 3 cars and an acre of land, fair market value considering their condition. Lily tugged at Emma's sleeve, her voice filled with the excitement of possibility. Mom, $1! We have that! We can buy a whole train! Emma's throat tightened. This was absurd. She'd come seeking financial salvation, not another burden. These cars needed tens of thousands of dollars in work to become truly habitable. She had no money, limited construction experience, and no practical way to transform abandoned railway equipment into a home for her and her daughter. Yet Dorothy's steady gaze suggested this wasn't just a transaction. It was a test, or perhaps a gift, whose true nature she couldn't yet perceive. Why would you do this? Give away valuable property for $1? Dorothy stood, brushing invisible dust from her skirt. Because your father spent 40 years preparing this place for exactly this moment. He knew you'd come when you'd lost everything else, when you had nowhere left to run. He believed in second chances, in rebuilding from ruins, in proving that abandoned things still hold worth. She held out her hand, palm up, waiting. Emma reached into her wallet and extracted her last dollar bill. The symbolism wasn't lost on her. Rock bottom with nowhere to go but up. She placed the bill in Dorothy's palm, and the old woman's fingers closed around it with surprising formality. From her pocket, Dorothy produced a handwritten receipt, already filled out as if she'd expected this outcome all along. It's yours now, all yours. There's a cabin half a mile down the track west where I stay most nights. Smoke from my chimney is visible from here. If you need anything, follow the track. Otherwise, you'll want to start making this place livable before winter comes. She placed the music box in Lily's hands, the child's eyes widening with delight. Your grandpa recorded this himself. Win the key on the bottom. Dorothy turned to leave, then paused at the door. He always knew you'd have questions. Check the freight car. His tools are there, his plans, everything you'll need. He knew you'd understand what he couldn't say. With that cryptic statement, Dorothy disappeared into the gathering darkness, leaving Emma alone with her daughter, their dog, and 3 train cars that now belonged to them through the strangest inheritances she'd ever encountered. Lily wound the music box key. A familiar melody filled the passenger car, a lullaby Emma's mother used to sing. The realization hit her. Her father had recorded this before her mother died, preserving a piece of the family they'd once been. As the music played, Lily's exhaustion finally caught up with her. The child curled into one of the old seats, Scout jumping up beside her despite the dog's size, both settling into sleep with the adaptability of youth and animal instinct. Emma stood at the observation window, watching stars multiply across the darkening sky. In Chicago, light pollution obscured all but the brightest celestial bodies. Here, the Milky Way blazed across the heavens with enough intensity to cast shadows. The beauty offered no comfort, only a reminder of how far she'd fallen from her carefully constructed life. She returned to the music box, now silent, its melody complete. Lifting it to examine the craftsmanship, she noticed something odd about the weight distribution. The bottom felt heavier than the simple mechanism should account for. Emma pried at the felt lining of the base until it came loose, revealing a small compartment beneath. Inside lay a strip of microfilm, carefully preserved in a protective sleeve. Emma held it up to the faint light from her phone, but the images were too small to discern without proper equipment. Whatever her father had hidden here, he'd gone to considerable lengths to protect it. The music box, the train cars, the secret deed arrangement with Dorothy, all of it spoke to a man who'd been planning for years, preparing for a contingency he'd never lived to see realize. Too exhausted to investigate further, Emma cleared debris from a section of seats and arranged her jacket as a pillow. Using the emergency blanket from her backpack as bedding, she created a makeshift camp beside her sleeping daughter. Through broken windows, mountain air flowed cool and clean, carrying scents of pine and earth that were alien after years of city living. Sleep approached fitfully, her mind churning through the day's impossibilities. Tomorrow she'd need to assess what she actually had to work with, determine whether these train cars could be made genuinely livable, or if she'd need to sell them immediately just to survive. But for tonight, she had shelter. For tonight, they were safe. This isn't permanent, she reminded herself. Just a temporary stop until I figure things out. Yet as consciousness faded, her father's words echoed through her mind. Something abandoned but never broken. Worth 1,000,000 lives saved. What had he been protecting? And why had he believed she'd be the one to finally bring it into light? Morning arrived with golden light streaming through dusty windows and the disorienting sensation of not knowing where she was. Emma sat up, muscles protesting from the uncomfortable night on narrow seats. Lily remained asleep, curled against Scout's bulk, the dog's steady breathing providing the child with both warmth and security. The train car looked different in daylight. Less mysterious, more dilapidated. Water stains mapped the ceiling in archipelagos of decay. The floor beneath her makeshift bed sagged ominously. She stepped carefully through the passenger car into the dining car, testing floorboards before committing her weight. The observation area maintained its curved panoramic windows, though several panes had cracked or fallen away entirely. A long service counter ran along one wall, its surface scarred but solid. Banks of bench seating faced the windows, offering what must have once been spectacular views for passengers dining their way through the mountains. The freight car proved sturdiest, its utilitarian construction having weathered decades better than its passenger-focused companions. High windows provided light without the vulnerability of large glass panes. And dominating one corner, exactly as Dorothy had indicated, sat a massive metal toolbox bearing her father's initials, DW. Emma approached it slowly, as if the container might hold more than tools, might contain explanations for the distance that had defined their relationship. The padlock opened with the key Dorothy had provided. Inside lay rows of meticulously organized implements, many bearing the patina of age and use, but all clean and rust-free. Hammers, wrenches, chisels, planes, saws. A craftsman's collection, not a hobbyist's. Beneath the top tray, she found engineering notebooks, their pages filled with her father's precise handwriting and detailed sketches. Train car schematics, renovation plans, structural calculations, years of work, all focused on transforming these abandoned cars into something habitable. Emma sat back on her heels, a complex emotion rising in her chest. Her father, the man who'd seemed perpetually distracted during her childhood, who'd missed recitals and parent-teacher conferences for work emergencies, had poured his heart into this place. While she'd been building her career believing he'd forgotten her, he'd been creating something far more substantial than empty words or awkward visits. He'd been building proof of what he couldn't say. A sound outside pulled her attention. Scout barking, not alarmed but insistent. Emma emerged to find a weathered pickup truck parked near the tracks, and a tall, gray-bearded man examining her emergency roof patch with critical interest. He wore worn work clothes and carried a toolbox that made her father's collection seem modest by comparison. Campaign patches on his jacket indicated military service, Vietnam, Corps of Engineers. The man turned at her approach, eyes assessing without hostility. That support beam needs reinforcing before you hang anything from it. Your roof patch won't last through winter, and whatever you're planning for that west wall, reconsider. It gets the worst weather. Emma bristled at the unsolicited critique, then recognized the expertise behind it. Are you a contractor? The man's laugh emerged rusty, like machinery rarely used. Was, retired now, Frank Coleman. Built houses, Barnes bridges. Started on the railroad when I was younger than you. Army Corps of Engineers for 30 years after that, building in places most folks never heard of. His mention of railroads sparked Emma's interest. Did you know these cars? Work on this line? Something flickered in Frank's expression, recognition perhaps, or wariness. Worked the Highland Line from 68 to 75 till it closed. This was the Blue Ridge Express, 3-car specialized service. Used to run from Charlottesville through to Asheville, with stops at mining towns along the way. Beautiful route before everything went to hell. Emma hesitated, then retrieved the photograph she'd found. Her father and an unidentified man standing before these very cars, dated July 1975. She held it out, watching Frank's face carefully. Do you recognize either of these men? Frank studied the image, his expression unreadable. After a long moment, he handed it back without comment. Lot of men work these rails. Can't place every face after 50 years. The evasion was obvious, but Emma chose not to press. Instead, she mentioned the support beam he'd criticized, asking how he'd approach the repair. Frank's demeanor shifted immediately, enthusiasm replacing caution as he launched into detailed explanation of proper reinforcement techniques. Before Emma fully realized what was happening, Frank had set down his toolbox and begun demonstrating the correct approach. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, making adjustments that would have taken her days to figure it out independently. By the time Lily emerged from the passenger car, rubbing sleep from her eyes, they'd reinforced the beam properly and identified 3 other critical structural issues requiring immediate attention. The child approached cautiously, staying close to Scout. The dog, however, showed none of Lily's wariness. Scout trotted directly to Frank, tail wagging, and pushed her head under his hand with the familiarity of old friends. Frank's weathered face softened as he scratched behind the dog's ears. Hello, girl. You keeping these two safe? That's a good dog. Lily's natural friendliness overcame caution. Her name is Scout. She found the train cars. She knew exactly where to go, even though we'd never been here before. How did she know, Mr. Coleman? Frank's hand stilled in the dog's fur, his expression shifting to something Emma couldn't quite read. Dogs have instincts, memory in their bones, maybe. Could be her parents or grandparents knew this place, and she inherited the knowledge somehow. He stood, brushing dust from his jeans. I've got salvaged materials at my place. Steel plates that would secure those loose sections. Roofing material better than those tarps. Might bring some by tomorrow if you're interested. Emma recognized the offer's significance. Not just materials, but expertise freely given. What do you want in exchange? Frank's weathered face remained impassive. Nothing needed. Been a while since I worked on anything worthwhile. Gets boring. Retirement. These old cars deserve better than slow decay. He glanced at the train, something like recognition in his eyes. Your father spent 40 years maintaining this place. Seems wrong to let it fall apart now. After he left, Emma returned to the photograph, studying it more carefully. The initials on the back, DW and TC, David Walsh and Thomas Coleman. The matching surname couldn't be coincidence, but Frank's face had revealed nothing. Whatever connection existed between him and her father, the old man clearly wasn't ready to acknowledge it. That evening, Emma tucked Lily into their sleeping area with Scout curled protectively around the child. The music box sat on a seat beside them, its melody having become part of their new bedtime routine. As Lily's breathing deepened into sleep, Emma pulled out her father's notebooks and began reading with purpose rather than emotion. His plans proved methodical, breaking renovation into manageable phases. Phase 1 focused on basic habitability, structural repairs, weather protection, simple systems for water collection and waste management. Later phases addressed aesthetics and comfort improvements. Most critically, his notes included cost estimates and material sources. Many materials could be salvaged from abandoned structures in the area or purchased at minimal cost. Labor, his most significant investment, would be her contribution. Emma found herself simultaneously impressed and hurt. Impressed by the thoroughness, hurt by the realization that while he'd been planning this sanctuary, she'd been in Chicago believing he didn't care. The contradiction felt cruelly on brand for their relationship. A sound from outside drew her attention. Scout lifted her head, ears swiveling forward, a soft whine escaping her throat. Emma moved to the door cautiously, peering into darkness broken only by starlight. Nothing visible, but the dog's tension suggested something out there warranted attention. Then she heard it, branches snapping under weight, the sound of something or someone moving through the forest near the tracks. Scout's whine intensified, the dog torn between protecting Lily and investigating the disturbance. Emma's phone showed no signal. No way to call for help if help even existed out here. She grabbed the hammer from her father's toolbox, its weight solid and reassuring in her hand. The sounds grew closer, accompanied now by voices, male, discussing something in tones too low to make out words. Scout erupted from the train car before Emma could stop her, barking with a ferocity the dog had never displayed. The sounds retreated rapidly, whoever had been approaching now fleeing through the underbrush. Emma listened until silence returned, broken only by Scout's continued low growls. When the dog finally trotted back, Emma pulled her inside and secured the door as best she could with the train car's ancient, unreliable locks. She lay awake for hours afterward, hammer beside her, every forest sound magnified by imagination and adrenaline. Tomorrow she'd need to make decisions about whether staying was worth the risks she'd just begun to understand. But tonight sleep came fitfully, if at all, her father's words haunting the darkness. The truth stays buried until someone brave enough brings it into light. What truth? And what would bringing it to light cost her and Lily? Morning arrived with Frank's truck rumbling up the access road, its bed loaded with materials that would have bankrupted Emma's remaining funds. He worked alongside her through the day, teaching techniques her architectural education had never covered. How to seal joints against mountain weather, where to reinforce load-bearing points, which compromises were acceptable and which invited disaster. Lily appointed herself tool manager, organizing implements with a precision that reminded Emma uncomfortably of her father. By afternoon, they'd made the freighted car genuinely weatherproof. Frank demonstrated proper ventilation to prevent moisture buildup, explaining how condensation could destroy structural integrity faster than external rain. His knowledge flowed freely, decades of experience distilled into practical lessons. Yet whenever Emma tried to steer conversation toward the photograph or the railway's closure, he deflected with the skill of long practice. Scout maintained vigilant patrol around the train's perimeter, occasionally growling at sounds Emma couldn't identify. The dog's behavior had shifted since their arrival, becoming more protective, more territorial. As if the animal recognized threats Emma's human senses missed. They were securing the last window seal when an expensive SUV navigated the rough access road, its polished exterior incongruous against the wilderness setting. A man emerged, his tailored casual wear marking him as aggressively out of place. Early 40s, professionally fit, carrying himself with the confidence that came from never hearing the word no without financial ability to change the answer. He approached with a bouquet of wildflowers that looked suspiciously similar to the arrangement Emma had found on the freight car steps. "Mrs. Walsh? Blake Harrington. I wanted to apologize for what happened the other night." Emma's hand instinctively found Lily's shoulder, pulling her daughter close. "I don't know what you're talking about." Blake's smile held practiced sympathy. "The men who came by your train cars. Trespassing, causing concern. They were contractors I'd hired to assess the property for development purposes. They exceeded their instructions. I've terminated their employment." Frank straightened from his work, tools still in hand, his military bearings suddenly visible beneath the weathered exterior. "Harrington Development. Your grandfather ran Highland Mining Corporation." Blake's smile never wavered. "Ancient history. My family has evolved significantly since those days. We create sustainable mountain resorts now, honoring local character while providing economic opportunities." He turned his attention to Lily, crouching to her eye level with calculated charm. "You must be Lily. What a brave girl, living in train cars like an adventure. Though winter here gets harsh, no place for a child without proper heating and facilities." The implied threat landed with precision. Scout positioned herself between Blake and Lily, a low growl building in the dog's chest. Blake's smile tightened fractionally before he stood, addressing Emma again. "I understand you're facing financial difficulties. Bankruptcy, job loss, custody concerns. I could help navigate those regulatory challenges. Child Protective Services can be quite particular about living conditions for minors." Emma's voice came out harder than she'd intended. "We're fine. We don't need your help." Blake placed his business card on Frank's workbench, his movements deliberate. "When you're ready to discuss your family's future seriously, call me. These mountains are beautiful but unforgiving. I'd hate for your daughter to suffer from poor decisions made in desperation." After he left, Lily pressed against Emma's side, her voice small. "I don't like that man, Mom. His smile was wrong." Frank gathered his tools with movements gone rigid. "Harrington family has been trying to develop this valley for decades. Your father's train cars sit on the one piece of land they've never been able to acquire. Now they know you're here, vulnerable, and they'll pressure every angle until you sell or break." That evening, Emma's phone managed to catch weak signal long enough for a call from Henry Barrett. The attorney's voice carried apologetic tension. "Mrs. Walsh, Mayor Carson contacted my office. He's raising questions about your property claim. Apparently, the train cars occupy National Forest land through a special use permit that expired when the railway went bankrupt. There are discrepancies in the deed that require immediate attention." Emma's chest tightened. "Barrett, I paid Dorothy Hayes $1 for clear title. You were the one who arranged this." A long pause. "I'm discovering the situation is more legally complex than your father led me to believe. Carson is filing a motion requiring you to vacate within 30 days unless proper documentation can be produced." After the call ended, Emma stood on the observation deck watching darkness claim the valley. The beauty that had seemed promising yesterday now felt like a trap closing around her and Lily. No money, no choice, no legal standing, and a powerful corporation circling like a predator that had identified wounded prey. Frank found her there an hour later. I know someone who might help, environmental lawyer named Kate Chen. She's fought Harrington development before. Won cases everyone said were impossible. If you're serious about staying, you'll need her. 2 days later, a hybrid SUV navigated the access road with determined efficiency. The woman who emerged projected focused intensity that reminded Emma of prosecutors she'd seen on television. Mid-40s, Vietnamese American, carrying both a laptop and files thick enough to qualify as weapons. Kate Chen wasted no time on pleasantries. I've been following your situation. May I see the evidence your father preserved? Emma hesitated, then retrieved the documents she'd found. Geological surveys, correspondence, photographs of contaminated waterways, medical records bearing the weight of preventable tragedy. Kate examined each page with professional detachment that couldn't quite mask underlying fury. These are copies, but legally admissible. More importantly, if current contamination matches these historical patterns, it triggers mandatory environmental review. Harrington can't develop poisoned land without years of remediation. Lily emerged from the passenger car where she'd been doing homework, Scout at her heels. The child approached Kate with the directness of youth. Are you going to help us fight the bad men? Kate's expression softened fractionally. I'm going to try, but I need to know, are you prepared for this to get harder before it gets better? Powerful people don't surrender easily. Emma pulled Lily close. They threatened my daughter. I don't care how powerful they are. Kate nodded, pulling out a legal pad. Then we need strategy. I'll file for emergency historical designation, challenge the eviction procedurally, and request environmental testing of current conditions. But legal work requires funding I assume you don't have. Frank spoke from where he'd been quietly observing. I've got retirement savings, never found anything worth spending them on. This qualifies. Kate's assessment swept over Frank with the precision of someone calculating assets and liabilities. And you are? Frank Coleman, Army Corps of Engineers, retired. The man in that photograph with David Walsh was my brother Thomas. He died trying to expose what's in those documents. I've been waiting 50 years for someone to finish what he started. The revelation hung in the mountain air, decades of secrets finally surfacing. Emma stared at Frank, understanding flooding through her. The resemblance to the young man in the photograph, the evasions, the intimate knowledge of the railway's history. Frank wasn't just a helpful neighbor. He was the last living witness to whatever had happened in July 1975. That evening, after Kate had departed with promises of immediate legal action, Lily spread her father's map across the dining car counter. She'd retrieved her school folder from their belongings, pulling out postcards Emma had never known existed. 15 cards, each bearing an animal illustration and her grandfather's handwriting. Mom, the animals on Grandpa's map match my postcards. See? Bear, owl, fox, deer. They're not just decorations. They're a code. Emma examined the postcards with growing amazement. Each contained a riddle on the back, seemingly innocent childhood puzzles. But arranged in the order they'd been sent, they formed a narrative. The bear guards what the owl preserved. The fox follows water to find what they protected. The deer watches from the place of rest. Lily's finger traced the map. We found the bear's hiding spot in the dining car wall. The owl symbol is at the freight car where Grandpa kept his tools. But we haven't checked the fox or the deer yet. Frank leaned over their shoulders, his weathered face showing the first real emotion Emma had seen from him. Thomas used to say foxes were nature's investigators, always following streams, finding things others missed. The next morning, they followed the fox marker on David's map. Lily led, using the postcards as guides, her child's perspective, seeing connections adults overlooked. The trail wound downstream from the train cars, following a mountain creek that ran clear and cold over smooth stones. Scout suddenly stopped, refusing to drink despite obvious thirst. Frank noticed immediately. Dogs sense contamination before humans. If she won't drink, there's a reason. Kate Chen joined them, having returned with equipment for collecting water samples. She'd been documenting everything for EPA filing, building a case that would force environmental review regardless of Harrington's political influence. Lily spotted it first, a small cave entrance behind a waterfall, marked with a fox carving worn smooth by decades of weather. Inside, protected by the constant spray that discouraged casual exploration, sat 4 waterproof metal cases. Emma's hands trembled as she opened the first. Original documents, not copies. EPA reports bearing official seals, medical records with actual doctor signatures, affidavits notarized and witnessed. Her father hadn't just preserved evidence. He'd hidden the originals that everyone assumed had been destroyed in the railway incident. The second case held Thomas Coleman's personal journal, its leather binding cracked but intact. The third contained audio cassette tapes labeled Victim Family Interviews 1974 to 1975. The fourth held soil and water samples in sealed containers, preservative techniques that might allow modern testing to confirm historical contamination. Kate's professional detachment cracked as she examined the cache. This changes everything. Original documentation, chain of custody preserved, physical samples. Harrington Development has been operating on the assumption that all evidence was destroyed 50 years ago. They're wrong. That night, Frank read his brother's journal aloud for the first time, his voice breaking on entries that revealed Thomas's growing desperation. March 1973, discovering discharge pipes running directly into the creek. August 1973, the third child diagnosed with leukemia. January 1974, meeting David Walsh, finally finding someone who believed the threat was real. The final entry, dated July 12, 1975 at 6:12 a.m., ended mid-sentence. Something's wrong. David called. Someone tampered with brake system overnight. We're postponing transport. David's checking. Lily's voice cut through the silence. Mr. Frank, was your brother scared? Frank closed the journal carefully, his weathered hands steady despite the emotion in his voice. Probably terrified, but he did it anyway. That's the thing about real courage. It doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you do what's right even when fear tries to stop you. Kate's phone lit up with an email notification that shattered the moment's reverence. Her face went pale as she read, then looked up at Emma. My lab results came back early. Current water and soil contamination levels are higher now than they were in 1975. Not residual, active. Same chemical signatures, increased concentrations. Emma's mind struggled to process the implications. How is that possible? The mining operation closed 40 years ago. Kate pulled up corporate ownership documents on her laptop, tracing a web of shell companies and renamed entities. Highland Mining Corporation went bankrupt in 1970. Assets purchased by Mountain Resources LLC in 1977. MRL merged with Harrington Development Partners in 1995. The same family has controlled operations under various names for 5 decades. They never stopped. They just got better at hiding it. Frank's voice emerged flat, decades of grief crystallizing into cold fury. They killed my brother to protect their operation. Then they kept poisoning the valley anyway. The next morning brought new crisis. Emma walked Lily to Ridge Valley Elementary for her first day, having enrolled her daughter in the small school where Dorothy's nephew taught. The building held perhaps 60 students total, everybody knowing everybody's business with the intensity unique to isolated communities. Emma tried to mask her anxiety as she watched Lily disappear into the classroom, Scout waiting in the truck since dogs weren't permitted inside. The teacher, Mr. Barman, Wilson had been briefed on their situation and promised to keep Lily safe. But promises felt inadequate against the weight of Blake Harrington's resources and implied threats. At 3:15 p.m., Emma arrived for pickup. Most parents had already collected their children. Lily stood on the playground with Sophie Porter, Benjamin's granddaughter, both girls laughing at some shared joke. Normal, safe. Then a black sedan with tinted windows pulled near the playground gate. 2 men emerged, not local, their movements purposeful as they approached Lily directly. Emma started running before conscious thought caught up with instinct. Your mom sent us to pick you up. She's waiting at the train. Lily's response came with the clarity of a child who'd been taught to trust her instincts. My mom is right there. She pointed at Emma, still 30 yards away but closing fast. The first man grabbed for Lily's arm. Sophie screamed. And Scout, who'd been lying in the truck with windows cracked for air, exploded through the glass with a sound that would haunt Emma's nightmares. The dog covered 50 yards in seconds, a blur of protective fury that slammed into the first man with enough force to knock him sprawling. The second man drew a weapon, and Emma's heart stopped. But Benjamin Porter, who'd been collecting Sophie, tackled him from behind with the efficiency of someone who had seen combat. Mr. Wilson pulled the fire alarm, flooding the playground with witnesses. The sedan peeled out, tires shrieking. State police arrived within minutes, the school going into lockdown protocol as officers took statements from everyone present. Lily sat wrapped in Emma's arms, trembling, but unhurt. Scout pressed against them both, blood on the dog's muzzle from where she'd bitten through the truck window. When the vet arrived to check the dog for injuries, Lily refused to let go of Scout's collar. "She saved me, Mom." She knew they were bad before I did. At the state police station, investigators interviewed Lily with Emma present. The child's statement came clear and detailed, describing the attempted abduction with the precision of someone who understood exactly what had happened. When asked if she recognized the men, Lily shook her head. "But I recognized the car. It was parked near our train yesterday when that mean Mr. Harrington visited." The partial plate Benjamin had memorized traced to a shell company with documented ties to Harrington Development. Blake's legal team issued immediate denials, calling it unfortunate coincidence, claiming no knowledge of any attempted abduction. But Captain Morrison of the state police made clear this had escalated beyond local jurisdiction. Federal authorities may get involved for attempted child kidnapping. FBI doesn't care how much money someone has. That night, the Freecar hosted an emergency gathering that felt more like war council than community meeting. 40 people crammed into the space, their anger palpable. Lily sat with Scout, the child's hand buried in the dog's fur as she processed trauma that no 9-year-old should experience. Emma addressed the crowd, her voice shaking with fury she'd been suppressing for Lily's benefit. "They came for my daughter, not for documents or property. They terrorized a child to silence us. And I'm done being quiet." The community's rage transcended previous divisions. Pastor Marcus, who'd maintained careful neutrality until now, spoke with conviction that surprised no one who knew his history. "This is evil. No economic benefit justifies targeting children." Benjamin placed Scout's heroism in terms the valley understood. "That dog saved a little girl's life by going through glass. She's got more courage than grown men who hide behind lawyers and shell companies." Sophie hugged Lily fiercely. "You were so brave. You didn't panic. You knew what to do." Kate laid out legal strategy with the precision of someone who'd been preparing for exactly this escalation. "Attempted kidnapping changes everything. FBI involvement means federal investigation. If we can connect it to covering up environmental crimes, RICO statutes apply. Corporate conspiracy, obstruction of justice, endangering minors, we can dismantle their entire operation." Frank's voice cut through the planning. "We go on offensive. No more waiting for their next attack. We release everything: Thomas's evidence, David's preservation work, Kate's current testing, force sunlight on the whole operation before they can hurt anyone else." Kate already had contacts. Michaela Williams, a regional environmental journalist whose investigative work had earned industry recognition. The pitch proved irresistible. 50-year conspiracy, toxic contamination, childhood cancers, attempted kidnapping to maintain cover-up, plus the underdog narrative that media couldn't resist. Single mother architect versus corporate dynasty. Emma set one condition: Lily doesn't talk to press. This traumatized her enough. Frank volunteered immediately. "I'll tell Thomas's story, put my face on camera. I'm 72 years old. They can't hurt me worse than they already have." Strategy finalized quickly. Monday, they'd release Thomas Coleman's evidence to media. Kate would file federal environmental complaints. FBI investigation would proceed independently. Saturday, the community would organize public demonstration, making their opposition visible and documented. Lily looked up from where she'd been quietly processing everything. "Can I write a letter for the kids who got sick in 1975? So people know they mattered?" The request broke something in Emma. Pride and pain mixing as she recognized her father's heart beating in this child who'd been terrorized but still thought about justice for others. "Yes, baby. We'll make sure everyone knows they mattered." Later, after the crowd had dispersed and Lily slept with Scout curled protectively around her, Emma sat in the observation car watching stars wheel overhead. The beauty felt obscene against the day's violence. Nature's indifference to human suffering, stark and undeniable. Kate found her there, 2 mugs of tea in hand. She'll be okay. Kids are resilient, especially when they have parents who fight for them. Emma accepted the tea, its warmth inadequate against the cold that had nothing to do with temperature. I brought her here thinking I was giving her shelter. Instead, I've put her in the middle of a war zone. Kate settled beside her, gaze following Emma's to the valley below. Your father brought you here because he knew you'd fight. Not because you were desperate or broken, but because you have something these corporate parasites will never understand. The willingness to lose everything for what's right. He saw that in you when you refused to falsify those safety reports. That's why he left you this place at exactly the moment you'd need it. The words settled like stones, their weight both burden and foundation. Emma thought about the choice she'd made in Chicago, the integrity that had cost her career. Then she thought about Lily's letter to unknown children who died 50 years ago, a 9-year-old's instinct for justice that transcended personal trauma. Some legacies weren't measured in property or money. They were measured in the courage to stand when standing cost everything, transmitted across generations like genetic memory. Her father had carried Thomas Coleman's truth for 40 years. Now that burden, that privilege, belonged to her and Lily. Monday morning arrived with the weight of an anvil. Michaela Williams' investigation published at dawn across regional news services, her headline capturing everything. 50 years of poison, how one family's greed killed a valley's children. The article laid out Thomas Coleman's original documentation with forensic precision. Frank's on-camera interview provided human dimension to historical data. Kate's current testing proved the contamination was ongoing. Medical records quantified the cost in children's lives and featured, prominently, with Emma's permission, Lily's letter. My name is Lily. I'm 9 years old. My grandpa David knew you were sick and tried to help you. He couldn't save you, but he saved the truth about what happened to you. You mattered. You are not forgotten. I promise to remember you forever. The letter went viral within hours, shared across social media platforms with the momentum of authentic emotion that corporate PR could never manufacture. Lily became minor celebrity at school, classmates wanting to help, teachers treating her with new respect. Regional media picked up the story. National outlets followed. Suddenly, Ridge Valley wasn't just another Appalachian town, but the epicenter of corporate accountability questions that resonated far beyond mountain boundaries. Blake Harrington's carefully worded statement expressed sympathy while denying responsibility for historical operations conducted under different corporate structure. The legal language, clearly drafted by attorneys, reinforced perception of callous corporations prioritizing liability protection over human impact. By Friday, momentum had shifted palpably. The community rally scheduled for Saturday drew commitments from 300 people, unprecedented for a valley whose population barely exceeded 400. Supporters were coming from neighboring counties, environmental advocates who saw their own fights reflected in Ridge Valley's struggle. Frank stood on the observation deck Friday evening, watching preparations below. Emma joined him, both silent as twilight painted the valley in amber and shadow. Thomas would have liked what you've built here. Not just the attention or the legal case, the community, people standing together when it would be easier to look away. Emma thought about the network that had formed around her and Lily in just a few weeks. Benjamin checking on them daily, Dorothy bringing food and mountain wisdom, Pastor Marcus organizing security, Sophie giving Lily friendship that transcended the trauma they'd both witnessed, Kate fighting legal battles she couldn't possibly afford alone, and Frank, whose grief had finally found purpose after 50 years of waiting. We built it, all of us. That's what my father understood. Some things require community, not just individual effort. Frank's weathered hand rested briefly on her shoulder, the gesture awkward but genuine. Your father would be proud. Thomas would be proud. And for what it's worth, I'm proud of you both. Saturday's rally transformed Ridge Valley's town square into something neither Emma nor most residents had ever witnessed. 300 people, many holding signs, some bearing photographs of children lost to contamination-related illness. Media crews documented everything. Regional news anchors doing live stand-ups against the backdrop of mountain community rising against corporate power. The speakers included Frank, describing Thomas's courage and death. Edward Coleman, Frank's cousin, breaking his 50-year non-disclosure agreement to describe his daughter Sarah, who died of leukemia at age 6. Emma speaking about her father's 40-year vigil protecting truth when everyone else had moved on. Then Lily stepped forward, unplanned, unscripted. Emma's heart clenched as her daughter approached the microphone Mr. Wilson had set up, Scout at her heels as always. The child's voice carried across the square with unexpected strength. My grandpa died before I was born, but he knew me. He sent me postcards with riddles that taught me how to solve mysteries. The biggest mystery was why he spent so much time away from family. Now I know. He was protecting families he'd never meet, being brave when he was scared. That's what heroes do, and my mom is a hero too. She lost her job because she wouldn't lie. She lost our home, but she never lost what matters most. She taught me that some things are worth fighting for even when you're afraid. The crowd erupted, standing ovation rolling across the square. Emma watched her daughter through tears, seeing strength she'd tried to shield Lily from needing. But perhaps that had been wrong. Perhaps children needed to see adults fighting for what mattered, needed to understand that courage wasn't absence of fear, but action despite it. A small group held counter-protest signs in Cameron Fries. Jobs over fear and progress not paranoia. Blake Harrington had funded them, anyone could see that, but they numbered perhaps a dozen against 300, their isolation stark. Sunday brought Blake himself, alone without attorneys or handlers. He arrived at the train cars in late afternoon when Emma was working on weatherproofing and Lily was doing homework inside. His mask had finally dropped. No practiced charm, no false sympathy, just cold calculation assessing assets and obstacles. Mrs. Walsh, let's discuss reality. You think you've won because you got media attention and community support. But federal investigations take years. Legal proceedings drag out forever. Meanwhile, you're raising a traumatized child in train cars with insufficient heating, no proper plumbing, no educational stability. Emma set down her tools, positioning herself between Blake and the passenger car where Lily worked. We're managing fine. Blake's laugh held no humor. Child Protective Services will disagree. Winter's coming, when temperatures drop below freezing and your daughter is living in conditions no court would approve. They'll act. Maybe not today, but soon. He pulled out a certified check, holding it where she could read the amount, $500,000. Immediate cash for property transfer, plus $200,000 in college trust fund for Lily, guaranteed position as heritage architect for Appalachian Heights Resort, public apology and charitable foundation in Thomas Coleman's name. Everyone wins. You secure your daughter's future. We move forward with development. The valley gets bucks and infrastructure. Emma's voice emerged steady despite the temptation that clawed at her resolve. And the contamination, the poisoned water, the children who died. Blake's expression hardened. Historical allegations without definitive proof of causation. My family built this region. We created jobs, infrastructure, prosperity. A few unfortunate casualties don't negate generations of contribution. Scout emerged from the train, positioning herself between Blake and Emma, a low growl building. Blake's hand moved toward the dog, aggressive, threatening. You don't understand who you're dealing with. Frank's truck appeared at exactly the right moment, pulling up with the timing of someone who'd been watching from a distance. The old man emerged with his full military bearing visible, decades of combat experience compressed into movements that needed no translation. Step away from her, now. Blake recognized the threat, calculating odds before backing down. The old railroad worker, still bitter after 50 years? Frank's voice carried the flat certainty of someone who'd built structures under enemy fire. Combat engineer, 30 years in war zones. You want to threaten someone? Try me. Blake's tactical retreat included one final shot. That recording is inadmissible. My lawyers will bury you. Emma held up her phone, the recording app still running. Court of public opinion doesn't have admissibility rules, and you just called murdered children unfortunate casualties. Wonder how that'll play on the news. After Blake left, Lily emerged from the train. She'd heard everything, her young face showing processing that no child should require. Mom, you can't take his money. Grandpa didn't save that evidence so we could sell it. Emma pulled her daughter close, Lily's words cutting through the temptation Blake had dangled. You're right, baby. Some things aren't for sale. Emma contacted Kate immediately after Blake's departure, his recorded admission and the $500,000 check photographed as evidence. Release everything, documents, recordings, testimony, full media blitz, no holding back. Kate's response carried grim satisfaction. Town hall meeting is scheduled for Thursday. Carson tried to keep it quiet, but word spread. The gymnasium will be packed. This becomes public reckoning, not backroom deal. The days between Sunday and Thursday stretched taut as overwound wire. Blake's legal team filed emergency motions attempting to block the meeting, claiming procedural irregularities and requesting closed session to protect proprietary business information. Kate countered each filing with documentation showing public interest superseded corporate privacy concerns. By Wednesday afternoon, a federal judge ruled the meeting would proceed as scheduled, open to public and media. Lily returned to school Tuesday with Scout accompanying her as registered emotional support animal. The paperwork Kate had expedited, cutting through bureaucratic resistance. The dog stayed in Mr. Wilson's classroom during lessons, a furry guardian whose presence reassured more than the child. Wednesday night, Emma found Lily awake past midnight, penning additions to her letter with the focused intensity of someone who understood stakes beyond her years. Mom, I keep thinking about those kids. Sarah Coleman was 6. That's 3 years younger than me. She didn't get to grow up, have friends, learn things. It's not fair. Emma sat beside her daughter on the narrow train car bed. No, baby, it's not fair. That's why we're fighting, so it doesn't happen to anyone else. Lily's pencil moved across paper with determined precision. I want to read this at the meeting. Not the whole thing, just the part about remembering. Is that okay? The request terrified Emma, exposing Lily to potential backlash, to Blake's concentrated venom, to the weight of adult conflict. But looking at her daughter's resolute expression, Emma recognized something that couldn't be protected away. Lily had inherited her grandfather's commitment to truth, her mother's refusal to compromise integrity. Shielding her from the fight's conclusion would diminish what they'd already sacrificed. If you're sure, but you don't have to, no one expects a 9-year-old to carry this burden. Lily's response emerged with clarity that belied her age. Grandpa carried it alone for 40 years. You carried it after losing everything. Mr. Frank carried it since his brother died. I can carry it for one night. Thursday arrived with crystalline cold that hinted at winter's approach. The high school gymnasium filled beyond capacity by 6:00 p.m., forcing latecomers to stand in hallways where speakers had been hastily installed. State police maintained order, their presence insurance against the tensions crackling through assembled crowd. The council sat behind folding tables on a raised platform, Mayor Carson at center looking diminished by the crowd's size and intensity. Blake Harrington occupied the front row with 5 attorneys, their expensive suits and leather briefcases visual shorthand for the resources differential between corporate and community opposition. Emma, Kate, Frank, and Lily took seats in the 3rd row, Scout lying at Lily's feet in the aisle. The dog's calm presence drew smiles from nearby children, Scout having achieved local celebrity status after the school incident. Carson called the session to order with forced joviality that fooled no one. We're here to discuss development proposals and address community concerns. Each side gets 30 minutes for presentations, followed by council questions and limited public comment. Blake's team opened with multimedia presentation that would have impressed Chicago boardrooms. Architectural renderings showed tasteful resort buildings nestled into mountain contours. Economic projections promise 400 permanent jobs and $12 million in annual payroll. Environmental mitigation plans detailed filtration systems and habitat preservation initiatives. Blake's lead attorney, silver-haired with courtroom authority, dismissed the contamination allegations with practiced precision. Historical claims lack credible scientific causation. Childhood cancers fell within normal statistical parameters for rural populations. Ms. Walsh's financial desperation has led her to embrace conspiracy theories. Our generous compensation offer demonstrates corporate citizenship beyond legal obligation. The implication? Paint Emma as desperate rather than whistleblower, reframe attempted kidnapping as coincidence, reduce Thomas Coleman's death to irrelevant history. The implication landed with calculated precision. Paint Emma as desperate conspiracy theorist rather than whistleblower, reframe attempted kidnapping as unfortunate coincidence, reduce Thomas Coleman's death to ancient history without bearing on current development. When Blake's presentation concluded, Carson gestured to Emma with transparent reluctance. "Ms. Walsh, you have 30 minutes. Emma approached the podium with materials that would have seemed laughable in Chicago. File folders instead of leather portfolios, printed photographs instead of digital renderings, handwritten notes instead of PowerPoint slides. But the contrast itself told a story: authentic grassroots opposition versus corporate packaging. Before discussing development, we need to address what happened here and why it matters today. She displayed Thomas Coleman's photographs of contaminated waterways from 1973, images that predated digital manipulation accusations. Fish floating belly up, water running, colors nature never intended, children with visible rashes playing near poisoned streams. Thomas Coleman was 32 years old when he discovered his family's mining corporation was knowingly discharging toxic waste into Highland watershed. He documented everything. Not because he hated his family or wanted to destroy jobs, because 23 children developed rare cancers in 2 years in a valley with 400 residents. Statistical impossibility became undeniable reality. She presented medical records, each page representing a child whose life had been shortened or ended by corporate decisions prioritizing profit over safety. Emma didn't editorialize. The documents spoke with authority no rhetoric could match. Thomas planned to transport affected families and evidence to federal authorities in Richmond on July 12, 1975. 3 days before scheduled departure, someone cut the brake lines on the Highland Railway. Thomas died in the resulting crash. Original evidence was supposedly destroyed. Federal case collapsed without physical proof or witness testimony. Frank stood, moving to join Emma at the podium. His presence shifted the narrative from abstract history to living memory. Thomas Coleman was my brother. I worked beside him on that railway. I helped him document contamination our family's company created. After he died, I changed my name and enlisted in the Army Corps of Engineers. Spent 30 years building in war zones because it felt safer than staying here where his ghost lived. Emma displayed Kate's current testing results, the scientific data showing contamination levels higher now than 50 years prior. This isn't historical allegation. It's ongoing poisoning. Same chemical signatures, increased concentrations. Either cleanup never happened or discharge continued under different corporate names. Kate approached to present ownership documentation, the web of shell companies and mergers connecting Highland Mining Corporation to Harrington Development across 5 decades. Corporate structure evolved. Family control remained constant. The Harrington dynasty has operated this valley as private resource extraction zone for 3 generations, leaving communities to bear costs of their profit. Edward Coleman rose from the audience, photograph of his daughter Sarah clutched in weathered hands. 7 other adults stood with him, each holding images of children lost to contamination-related illness. I signed a non-disclosure agreement in 1907, took $5,000 to stay silent about my daughter's leukemia. I was broken, drowning in medical debt and grief. That money felt like lifeline, even though accepting it meant betraying Sarah's memory. Today, I break that agreement publicly. My daughter's name was Sarah. She loved butterflies and drawing. She died at age 6 because corporate executives chose profit over children's lives. No development benefit justifies that cost. His voice cracked but held. I have grandchildren now. They live here. I won't let history repeat while I still draw breath. The gymnasium had gone silent, audience collectively holding breath. Even Blake's attorneys seemed to recognize the moment had transcended legal maneuvering into something more fundamental. Then Lily stood, Scout immediately at her side. Emma hadn't known her daughter planned this, panic and pride warring as Lily walked toward the podium with the determined step of someone who'd made irreversible decision. The child's voice carried across the gymnasium with startling clarity. My name is Lily Walsh. I'm 9 years old. Mr. Harrington's men tried to kidnap me from school because my grandpa left us evidence. If that evidence wasn't important and true, why would they be so scared of a kid knowing about it? She pulled out her postcards, holding them up for the crowd to see. My grandpa sent me these my whole life. Riddles and pictures that taught me how to solve mysteries. The last one said, when the little fox follows the water, she finds what the bear protected. He was teaching me to think like he did, to see connections others missed. He did that because he knew someday I'd need those skills to finish what he started. Lily's hand tightened on Scout's collar, the dog's steady presence anchoring her courage. I found the hidden evidence by following his clues. I read medical records about kids my age who got sick. Some died. That's not fair. They deserve to grow up like me. Mr. Harrington says we need jobs. But what good are jobs if our water makes kids sick? My mom says there's always another way to make money, but you only get one life. You can't make another life. She held up the drawings she'd made of the train cars. These aren't fancy, but they're honest. They hold truth. That's worth more than all the resort profits in the world. The applause started tentatively, then swelled into sustained ovation that forced Carson to bang his gavel repeatedly for order. Emma watched her daughter return to their seats. Lily's composure held until she collapsed into Emma's arms with trembling that revealed the courage required for public testimony. Blake's attorney attempted rebuttal, focusing on economic data and questioning emotional appeals. But Kate sprung her trap with surgical precision. Ms. Morrison, you mentioned thorough investigation by qualified experts. Those experts are subsidiaries of Harrington Legal Defense Fund, not independent analysis, corporate self-assessment. She pulled out documents with visible relish. We have internal Harrington memos discussing containment strategy for legacy contamination issues. References to neutralizing David Walsh if he resurfaces concerns. Discussion of removing obstacles to development timeline. These came from whistleblower within your organization, someone with conscience who couldn't stomach the deception anymore. Blake lunged to his feet, fury breaking through calculated calm. That's privileged attorney-client communication. How did you obtain it? Kate's smile held no warmth. Anonymous source. Federal whistleblower protections apply. Your question confirms authenticity. Blake's control shattered completely. My grandfather built this empire from nothing. My father expanded it. I won't let some bankrupt architect and her bastard daughter destroy 3 generations of work. The slur landed like physical blow. Lily flinched visibly, Scout immediately pressing against her. The gymnasium erupted, multiple voices shouting condemnation. Carson pounded his gavel futilely as Blake's attorneys grabbed their client, attempting damage control too late to matter. Emma stood, fury overriding caution as she approached the podium. You just insulted my daughter in a public forum, admitted your family built their empire on poisoned water, and somehow you still believe you're the victim in this story. The crowd's support roared around her, transforming gymnasium into something between courtroom and revival meeting. Carson finally restored order through sheer repetition, his gavel arm likely aching from sustained effort. Counsel will recess for deliberation. Blake stormed out, his legal team following with expressions suggesting they already planned damage control strategy. The 20-minute recess stretched to 45 as counsel consulted with municipal attorneys, the delay increasing tension until it felt like the air itself might ignite. When they reconvened, Carson's face showed defeat before he spoke. Counsel has reviewed testimony and evidence. We're voting on several motions. First, postpone development approval consideration pending comprehensive environmental assessment. The vote went 4-1, only Carson dissenting. Second, approve emergency independent environmental testing of Highland watershed and surrounding areas. 5-0. Third, grant historical designation to Blue Ridge Express train cars pending National Register review. 4-1, Carson again opposing. Fourth, dismiss eviction notice against Emma Walsh based on historical significance filing and documentary evidence of legitimate property claim. 4-1. Fifth, initiate investigation into potential conflicts of interest between Mayor's office and Harrington Development. 3-2, the margin narrow but sufficient. The gymnasium transformed into celebration, people embracing and cheering with the release of tension that had accumulated across weeks. Emma found herself surrounded by neighbors who'd become allies, their support overwhelming in its genuine warmth. Frank stood apart from the celebration, stepping outside alone. Emma followed after extracting herself from well-wishers, finding him on the school steps staring at stars that blazed overhead with winter clarity. "We did it, Thomas. We finally did it." His voice carried to the empty parking lot, decades of grief finding resolution in words spoken to someone who couldn't answer. Emma stood beside him silently, respecting the private moment until he acknowledged her presence. "Your father would have loved to see this, to know his preservation work mattered." That truth eventually surfaced despite 50 years of burial. Emma thought about the father she'd resented for his distance, the man who'd built sanctuary while she'd assumed he'd forgotten her existence. "I wish I'd understood him better when he was alive. Wish I'd known what he was protecting." Frank's weathered hand found her shoulder briefly. "He understood you perfectly. That's why he left everything to you and Lily. Because he recognized the strength required to stand against power, to lose everything for integrity. He saw that in you long before you saw it in yourself." Winter arrived with mountain vindictiveness. Snow fell in quantities that would have paralyzed Chicago, here simply accepted as seasonal reality. Emma and Lily learned rhythms dictated by weather: wood stove management, water system winterization, strategic stockpiling. The freight bow held steady heat through Frank's expertise and Dorothy's wisdom. Emma had insulated every gap, creating shelter that withstood single-digit temperatures. Solar panels and community-donated generator powered essentials when roads became impassable. Frank visited daily, snowshoeing in when his truck couldn't navigate drifts. He taught survival skills. Emma's architectural education never covered ice formation recognition, ventilation protocols, wood consumption calculations. Lily adapted with the resilience of youth. When school closed for snow days, she worked through lessons online, Scout lying across her feet providing warmth while Emma checked assignments in the evening. Sophie frequently joined via video call, both girls giggling over shared jokes that transcended their physical separation. Legal proceedings continued through winter months with the glacial pace of federal bureaucracy. EPA investigation launched formal review of Highland watershed contamination. FBI investigation into attempted kidnapping yielded 2 arrests, both suspects accepting plea deals that implicated Harrington Development in conspiracy charges. Blake Harrington faced federal indictment on multiple counts: obstruction of justice, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, environmental crimes, and RICO violations connecting his corporation's activities to organized criminal enterprise. His legal team fought viciously, but the whistleblower documents combined with Thomas Coleman's original evidence created prosecution case that even expensive attorneys struggled to dismantle. Mayor Carson resigned in February amid ethics investigation that revealed decades of financial entanglement with Harrington interests. The interim mayor, Pastor Marcus, proved far more sympathetic to Emma's situation and community preservation efforts. Kate Chen worked tirelessly, filing motions and attending hearings while juggling other cases. She refused payment beyond what Frank's retirement account could reasonably cover, her commitment transcending financial compensation into personal mission. By March, the valley began showing signs of seasonal transition. Snow melted into rushing streams, ice formations receding to reveal rock and earth beneath. Green shoots appeared in sheltered areas, herald of spring's inevitable arrival. Emma woke one morning to find Lily already awake, sitting cross-legged on her bed with Scout's head in her lap. The child held something Emma hadn't seen before, a sealed envelope bearing her father's handwriting, marked "Open in Spring when Lily turns 10. "Mom, I found this in the toolbox, false bottom. My birthday's next week. Can we open it now?" The 10th birthday Emma had been planning, community gathering to celebrate not just Lily's survival, but their collective victory. The envelope felt heavy beyond its physical weight, final communication from man who'd orchestrated their deliverance from beyond death. "Let's wait until your birthday." Your grandfather timed it specifically. March 15th arrived with temperatures warm enough for outdoor celebration. The train car's observation deck held 30 people comfortably, community members bringing food and decorations that transformed utilitarian space into festive gathering. Sophie led the children in games while adults clustered in conversations that ranged from mundane to profound. As sunset painted the valley in amber and rose, Emma presented Lily with the envelope. The crowd quieted, recognizing moment of significance beyond typical birthday ritual. Lily opened it carefully, extracting pages covered in her grandfather's meticulous engineer's script. She began reading aloud, her young voice carrying David Walsh's final words across the deck. Lily opened it carefully, extracting pages covered in her grandfather's meticulous engineer's script. She began reading aloud, her young voice carrying David Walsh's final words across the deck. My dearest Emma and Lily, if you're reading this, you've found the train cars, discovered Thomas Coleman's evidence, and chosen to fight. I'm proud of you, though I'll never tell you in person. Emma, I was a terrible father. After Thomas died, I became obsessed with preserving his evidence. The distance I kept wasn't because I didn't love you. It was because I loved you too much. Thomas's family was systematically destroyed for standing with him. His wife fled the state. His parents lost their home to arson ruled accidental. I went silent to protect you. I tracked your life online, read every article about your projects, saw your wedding photos, celebrated when Lily was born, though I couldn't be there. I sent Lily postcards because I couldn't send them to you. Each riddle trained her for what was coming, teaching her to see what adults miss. Lily, Grandpa loves you. You have your mother's courage and something uniquely yours, the ability to see truth others overlook. The train is yours. The valley is yours to protect. Most importantly, the truth is yours to carry forward. Some legacies aren't measured in property or money. They're measured in courage transmitted across generations, courage to stand against power, to value truth above convenience, to believe persistence overcomes privilege. The most important inheritance isn't these train cars. It's faith in processes larger than individual lives. I love you both. Always have. Always will. Build something beautiful. Lily folded the letter carefully, tears streaming down her face. Emma pulled her daughter close, both crying openly as the crowd around them processed David's posthumous revelation with their own emotional responses. Frank approached, his weathered face showing emotion usually kept locked away. He was a good man who made hard choices, carried burdens alone because he believed protecting those he loved meant distance. I understand that impulse better than most. The evening continued with celebration tinged by melancholy understanding that some gifts came wrapped in sacrifice. As guests departed into gathering darkness, Emma stood with Lily on the observation deck, watching valley lights appear like earthbound stars. Mom, do you forgive Grandpa for not being there when we needed him? Emma considered the question with the gravity it deserved. I forgive him because I finally understand him. He wasn't absent. He was preparing, building something that would be here exactly when we needed it most. That takes a different kind of courage than just showing up. Both matter. Both are hard. Lily leaned against her, Scout pressing close to complete their tight family unit. I'm glad we came here. Even though scary things happen, we found people who matter. We helped kids from long ago get remembered. We stopped bad people from hurting more families. That's worth being scared sometimes. The wisdom in her 10-year-old's assessment humbled Emma. Lily had processed trauma and transformation with resilience that suggested strength running deeper than genetics, something forged through trial rather than inherited. Spring arrived with the official confirmations that transformed temporary victories into permanent change. The Blue Ridge Express achieved National Register status in April, Emma's deed formalized without further challenge. EPA ordered $45 million in remediation. Harrington Development collapsed under legal fees and environmental liability. Blake Harrington accepted a plea deal, 6 years federal prison. His corporate dynasty ended not with dramatic trial but quiet capitulation, attorneys negotiating to avoid exposing even more damaging evidence. Emma converted the train cars into architectural consulting practice. Her reputation rehabilitated through national media coverage. Developers across Appalachia sought her expertise on sustainable tourism that honored rather than exploited local character. The work fulfilled her in ways Chicago never had, purpose replacing prestige as measure of success. Lily and Sophie founded an environmental education program at school, teaching watershed protection and community advocacy to younger students. Scout became certified therapy dog, her gentle presence at presentations making complex topics accessible to children who might otherwise tune out. Frank's daily presence evolved from helper to family, His expertise, invaluable as ongoing restoration, transformed train cars from survival shelter into documented preservation case study. They secured grants, hosted workshops, created blueprint other communities could follow. The freighted car became gathering space where Dorothy's cooking and Pastor Marcus's leadership helped Valley residents process generational trauma while building forward strategies. What had been Emma's desperate refuge had become communal resource, physical proof that collective determination could defeat corporate extraction. May afternoon found Emma, Frank, and Lily on the observation deck, watching spring unfold across the valley with explosive green that still startled after months of winter monochrome. Wildflowers dotted meadows below, their colors vivid against new grass. In the distance, construction crews worked on EPA remediation project, heavy equipment transforming poison sites into treated earth that would eventually support life again. Frank's voice carried contemplative weight. Thomas would have liked what you've built here, not just the legal victory or environmental cleanup, the community, people standing together when it would have been easier to look away. Emma thought about the network that had formed around her and Lily, how isolation had transformed into connection through shared struggle and mutual support. We built it together. That's what my father understood. Some things require community, not just individual effort. One person preserving truth isn't enough. It takes many voices refusing to forget, many hands building toward justice. Lily pointed toward the valley, her sharp eyes catching movement Emma initially missed. Look, deer crossing the meadow, a whole family of them. Scout's tail wagged, the dog content to observe rather than chase. Wildlife had returned as streams began running cleaner, as contaminated sites received treatment, as the valley started healing from 50 years of corporate extraction. Frank's weathered hand rested briefly on Emma's shoulder. Your father would be proud. Thomas would be proud. And for what it's worth, I'm proud of both of you. The moment stretched, 3 generations of fight compressed into peaceful afternoon that felt earned rather than granted. Emma reflected on journey from Chicago courthouse steps to this observation deck, from bankruptcy to purpose, from isolation to community. Her phone buzzed with email notification. Client inquiry, another development company seeking sustainable design consultation. The work kept coming, recommendations spreading through word-of-mouth networks faster than traditional marketing ever could. But for now, the laptop stayed closed. Priorities had shifted permanently. Professional achievement mattered less than Lily's laughter, Gout's contented sighs, Frank's presence, the valley's gradual restoration. Some victories weren't measured in courtroom decisions or financial settlements. They lived in spring, returning after brutal winter, in children learning environmental stewardship, in communities reclaiming self-determination from corporate control, in trust rebuilt between generations through shared commitment to truth. The train cars stood behind them, transformed from abandoned relics into living testimony. Solar panels gleamed on reinforced roofs. Gardens surrounded the observation deck. Vegetables and flowers planted by community members taking ownership of space they'd fought to preserve. Children's artwork decorated the freight car interior. Bright images showing trains and mountains and families standing together. Emma thought about the dollar she'd given Dorothy, transaction that had seemed absurd in the moment, but revealed itself as threshold between one life and another. Everything she'd lost in Chicago, career and home and security, had been prerequisite for finding what she hadn't known she needed. Purpose beyond personal advancement, community beyond professional networks, legacy beyond architectural monuments. Lily broke the contemplative silence. Mom, can we invite Grandma to visit this summer? I want her to see what Grandpa built, what we protected. Emma's relationship with her mother remained complicated, decades of distance not easily overcome. But the letter had shifted something. Understanding replacing resentment as Emma recognized the impossible position her father's secrets had created for everyone involved. Yes, baby, we'll invite her. She should see this place, understand what your grandfather was protecting all those years. The sun descended toward mountain ridges, painting sky and progression of colors that changed by the minute. Emma had learned to recognize patterns in sunset variations, how atmospheric conditions predicted next day's weather, which clouds meant rain and which promised clear skies. Mountain literacy she'd developed through necessity, but now valued for its own sake. Scout rose from where she'd been lying, stretching with the unself-conscious grace of animals unconcerned with appearances. The dog trotted to the deck's edge, looking out across the valley with alert attention that suggested she saw or sensed something human eyes missed. Frank followed the dog's gaze. Storm coming tomorrow. Big one based on those clouds building west. You'll want to check the roof seals, make sure drainage channels are clear. The casual confidence in his assessment reminded Emma how much she'd learned from this man who'd initially been stranger helping out of grief-driven obligation. He'd become mentor, friend, surrogate grandfather to Lily. The family they'd built wasn't traditional, didn't follow prescribed patterns, but it functioned with the strength of bonds forged through shared purpose rather than mere biology. As darkness claimed the valley and guests departed with promises to return soon, Emma stood alone on the observation deck. Lily had gone inside to prepare for bed. Frank had driven home after checking tomorrow's storm preparations. Scout drowsed in the passenger car beside Lily's sleeping area. Stars emerged with the brilliance unique to locations far from light pollution. The Milky Way stretched overhead, billions of stars compressed into luminous river, flowing across the celestial sphere. Emma thought about her father standing in the same spot decades earlier, planning and building and preserving, faith sustaining him through years when victory seemed impossible. She thought about Thomas Coleman dying for truth that took 50 years to emerge, about Frank changing his identity and spending 30 years building structures in war zones rather than facing his brother's ghost, about Dorothy maintaining the train cars through decades when no one else cared, about Kate fighting corporate power with limited resources but unlimited determination, about Lily finding courage Emma hadn't known 9-year-olds could possess. Some legacies weren't measured in property or money. They were measured in courage transmitted across generations, in communities refusing to forget, in truth eventually surfacing despite forces arranged against it. Her father had preserved possibility. Emma and Lily had transformed it into lived reality. The train cars represented more than shelter or historical artifact. They embodied proof that abandoned things weren't broken things, just waiting for someone who recognized their worth. That corporate power, however vast, eventually faced accountability when enough people stood together. That children poisoned by greed 50 years ago could finally be remembered with the dignity their young lives deserved. Emma returned inside to find Lily already asleep, Scout's steady breathing providing rhythm to the child's dreams. She checked the wood stove one final time, the ritual now muscle memory after months of mountain living. Through the window, stars wheeled overhead in patterns older than human conflict. The mountains would stand for millennia more, indifferent witnesses to extraction and restoration alike. Emma thought about her father's final words. Build something beautiful. They had. Not the home she'd imagined in Chicago, not the life she'd planned before everything collapsed. Something better. Something earned. The train that had been abandoned but never broken now carried forward the truth it had protected for 50 years. And that, Emma realized as sleep finally approached, was worth every sacrifice required to bring it into light.
So. Dann machen wir die so hier. Zacki, zack. Ja, schon wieder Overtime, Mann. Ach, immer diese Overtime-Games. Auf geht's.
Ich würde Richtung Elbow doggen erstmal. Das wäre gut, wenn ihr meinen Hintern habt und
Ja,
die nicht instant killen, wenn sie rauskommen.
Hier kommt Drohne, ne?
Ja, 2 sind auch vor.
Wenn das kommt, mache ich auch.
Keinen gesehen.
Die waren Dieb.
Am Main war noch einer. Jet.
Ja gut, die werden jetzt rotieren, ne?
Es könnte noch Elbow einer drin stehen,
Ich
Presi.
halte gerade noch Elbow.
Jet und Rainer Side.
Eine wird Mitte wahrscheinlich
Mach mal
schon
die
nehmen.
Wall hoch.
Ich würde ihn flanken eigentlich.
Jet ist aus CT, slow.
Weil wenn wir alle in Mitte gehen, das kannst du knicken.
Spike planted.
Hinter mir. Hä? Schon CT drin, CT
Bridge.
Base.
Last player standing.
2 Leute 10 AP. Jet so.